Welcome to Warfare Report, your definitive source for deep dive military analysis on global conflicts and high-stakes security dynamics. Today, we are breaking down a geopolitical earthquake. As of January 2026, the Islamic Republic of Iran is facing a systemic crisis that threatens to shatter the existing order of the Middle East. What began as localized economic protests has mutated into a nationwide uprising, further complicated by a violent escalation in Kurdish ethnic clashes. With the internet darkened by a state-mandated blackout and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, moving heavy armor into civilian centers, the stakes have never been higher. We are also tracking reports of elite U.S. assets, specifically Delta Force, repositioning along the border. Is this the end of the mullah's reign, or the beginning of a regional firestorm? Today, we analyze the tactics, the hardware, and the rumored covert operations that could redefine the Levant. The current wave of unrest erupted on December 28, 2025, but the fuel for this fire has been piling up for years. Decades of international sanctions, systemic corruption, and catastrophic mismanagement by the clerical regime have pushed the Iranian economy to a breaking point. Inflation has effectively decoupled from reality, unemployment is rampant among the youth, and basic necessities, from bread to fuel, have become luxury items for millions. From a military perspective, these are not just protests. They are a direct challenge to the regime's control apparatus. By January 2026, the demonstrations that started in Tehran and Isfahan had snowballed into a nationwide phenomenon, reaching every single province. The chants have evolved. Protesters are no longer just asking for lower prices. They are demanding the total dismantling of the Islamic revolutionary system and the removal of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The regime's response has been predictable and brutal. The IRGC, Iran's elite paramilitary force, has been placed on maximum alert. They view these riots not as an organic uprising, but as a hybrid war orchestrated by foreign intelligence services. State media, controlled by the hardliners, has labeled the protesters as evil elements and Takfiri agents. Human rights monitors, including Amnesty International and HRANA, estimate that over 70 people have already been killed by security forces using live ammunition and tear gas. As we speak, a nationwide internet blackout is entering its second day. This is a classic information isolation tactic designed to prevent protesters from coordinating and to hide the extent of the crackdown from the global eye. Now, we must look at the northwestern sector, where the unrest has taken on a far more lethal ethnic dimension. Iran's Kurdish population, concentrated in provinces like Kurdistan and West Azerbaijan, has a long history of resistance against Tehran's central authority. However, the 2025-2026 riots have seen an escalation that borders on open insurgency. In cities like Sanandaj and Mahabad, the strikes have evolved into direct urban combat. Kurdish rights groups report that at least 17 people have been killed in these regions in the first week of January alone. The IRGC has responded by deploying armored units and snipers to Kurdish-populated areas, treating the region as a hostile foreign front rather than a domestic province. Tehran's paranoia regarding the Kurds is rooted in the ethnic domino effect. They have repeatedly accused Kurdish militias based in neighboring Iraq, specifically those affiliated with the KDPI or the Peshmerga, of smuggling weapons and insurgents across the border. On January 3, 2026, security forces reportedly killed 11 protesters in a single engagement in the northwest, prompting Khamenei to declare that rioters should be put in their place. But the Kurdish factor isn't limited to Iran. Just days ago, on January 7th, deadly fighting resumed in Syria between government troops and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, in Aleppo. This spillover effect is emboldening regional actors. Iran's proxies, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, are currently stretched thin, forced to monitor their own borders for signs of contagion. Strategically, if Tehran loses its grip on the Kurdish provinces, we could see the emergence of a de facto autonomous zone similar to Iraqi Kurdistan. Such a fracture would be an existential threat to Iran's territorial integrity and would almost certainly trigger a Turkish military intervention, as Ankara remains hypersensitive to any Kurdish militancy near its own borders. Before we move into the rumored involvement of U.S. Delta Force and the technical details of the IRGC's counterinsurgency tactics, make sure you are subscribed to Warfare Report. We are tracking these movements in real time to bring you the analysis the mainstream media misses. If you find this breakdown valuable, hit the like button and help us reach more strategy enthusiasts. How is the regime maintaining its hold? The IRGC and the Basij militia are the primary enforcers. We have seen footage, often smuggled out despite the blackout, of armored personnel carriers rolling into the markets of Tehran. Reports indicate that snipers have been positioned on the rooftops of government buildings, and Bell 214 helicopter gunships are being used for aerial surveillance and crowd intimidation. The IRGC is not just a military. It is an economic and ideological empire with over 150,000 active personnel. However, the current unrest is exposing a critical vulnerability: overextension. The IRGC is currently funding and fighting proxy wars in Yemen, Syria, and Iraq, supporting these networks, while simultaneously suppressing a nationwide domestic uprising, is creating a massive logistical and psychological strain. Historically, authoritarian regimes do not fall because of the protests alone. They fall when the security forces fracture. If the IRGC conscripts, many of whom come from the very families suffering under hyperinflation, refuse to fire on their own people, the regime's foundation will crumble. For now, the loyalty of the core Quds force and the Basij holds, but the crackdowns are becoming increasingly desperate. On January 7th, clashes in Tehran's main market left dozens injured, with activists claiming that the regime is using force. The instability within Iran is not a localized event, it is a seismic shift, threatening to destabilize the entire Middle East. First, consider the proxy atrophy. For decades, Tehran has exported its revolution by pouring billions of dollars into the axis of resistance: Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen. As of January 2026, those pipelines are clogging, with domestic riots siphoning every available rial and the IRGC ground forces occupied with internal suppression. Iran's proxies are feeling the chill. Hezbollah, already reeling from the June 2025 kinetic strikes on Iranian nuclear infrastructure, is facing renewed calls within Lebanon to disarm. Any perceived weakness in Tehran acts as a green light for regional adversaries to strike harder at these peripheral assets. Then there is the ethnic domino effect. The Kurdish clashes we discussed are not occurring in a vacuum. In Syria, as recently as January 7th, fighting flared up again in Aleppo between government troops and the Kurdish-led SDF. This cross-border ethnic surge is a nightmare for Turkey. Ankara, a NATO member, has already signaled its intent to conduct preemptive operations if Kurdish militancy in Iran spills over. This creates a dangerous friction point. U.S. forces embedded with the SDF in Syria may find themselves caught between a NATO ally and a regional Kurdish uprising, potentially fracturing the alliance at a time of maximum tension. Economic ripple effects are also jittering global markets. Iran remains a major energy player, producing roughly 3 million barrels of oil per day. Any disruption to the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical maritime choke point, could send global oil prices into a triple-digit spike, hurting economies from Europe to East Asia. We are looking at a powder keg where a single tactical misstep could ignite a multi-front war involving Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the West. The most explosive element of the January 2026 crisis is the rumored deployment of the U.S. Army's 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, commonly known as Delta Force. Intelligence reports surfacing on January 6th suggest that elite Delta units, Task Force Green, have been repositioned to forward bases in Iraq's Diyala and Wasit provinces, a mere 450 kilometers from Tehran. This is not a routine rotation. Delta Force is the U.S. military's premier counterterrorism and high-value target extraction unit. Their repositioning follows the successful January 3rd operation in Caracas, where Delta was credited with the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The Venezuela model, a surgical rapid extraction mission to topple a regime leader without a full-scale invasion, is now the primary fear in Tehran. President Trump has added fuel to these reports. On January 10th, he issued a stark warning via social media, stating that if the Iranian regime continued to use lethal force against peaceful protesters, the United States would come to their rescue, adding, "We are locked and loaded." Trump's rhetoric, specifically the phrase, "we will start shooting," suggests a low threshold for kinetic intervention. Strategically, the positioning of Delta Force near the border serves three purposes: deterrence, warning the IRGC that the cost of a domestic bloodbath could be a direct U.S. surgical strike; asset extraction, preparing to secure or extract key anti-regime figures or defecting military leaders; nuclear safeguard, ensuring that in a regime collapse scenario, Iran's nuclear materials do not fall into the hands of rogue IRGC factions or terror groups. As we move deeper into January, we face three distinct possibilities for the future of the Islamic Republic. Scenario 1, the Tiananmen crackdown. In this outcome, the IRGC ground forces utilize maximum lethal force to crush the protests, effectively turning Iran into a fortress state. This would likely involve thousands of casualties and the total isolation of Iran from the global community, potentially triggering a preemptive strike by Israel to prevent a desperate regime from crossing the nuclear threshold. Scenario 2, the Yugoslav fragmentation. If the security forces fracture, as hinted by reports of small-scale defections on January 8th, Iran could descend into a multi-sided civil war. Ethnic Kurds in the northwest, Baluchis in the southeast, and Azeris in the north could declare autonomy, turning Iran into a patchwork of warlord-led territories. This is the chaos model, which would flood the region with refugees and create a power vacuum for ISIS remnants to exploit. Scenario 3, the sudden decapitation. Rumors of an escape plan for Supreme Leader Khamenei to Moscow suggest that the regime's inner circle is aware of its vulnerability. If a U.S. special operation or an internal coup removes the top tier of the clerical leadership, we could see a rapid transition to a military-led transitional council. This would be the most stable path to regime change, but it relies on the absolute precision of units like Delta Force. The Middle East is at a historic inflection point. Whether through internal collapse or external intervention, the Iran we knew in 2025 is gone. We are witnessing the birth of a new regional reality. This is Warfare Report. We are monitoring this crisis. To stay ahead of the curve and understand the truth behind the headlines, you must be subscribed. Hit the bell icon to get our emergency updates. What is your assessment? Is a U.S. intervention inevitable? Or can the regime survive this absolute resolve pressure? Let's hear your strategic analysis in the comments below. Stay informed, stay vigilant. This is Warfare Report, signing off.